Gone Global. Leading Britain's conversation. The Nigel Farage Show.
Mr. Nigel Farage.
Thank you, Donald, and good evening, everybody. Well, the big summit, of course, coming up this Thursday evening. 28 heads of government will be there in Brussels with, of course, Mr. Juncker and Mr. Barnier and civil service characters like Martin Selmayr. They'll all be there on Thursday, and we've kind of been expecting a big, dramatic showdown. But perhaps, rather sensibly, the government have decided, and the European Commission have decided, to get the whole thing, as far as the UK is concerned, done and dusted before then, which is why David Davis went out to Brussels yesterday, and there was a press conference this morning, and a transition deal, or as our Prime Minister calls it sometimes, an implementation period, has been agreed. The European Union's chief negotiator said it was a decisive step, and he announced that the transition will end on New Year's Eve 2020. He did admit, though, there's still a lot of work to be done, including important issues like the Northern Irish border.
We do have to make progress on a couple of points of divergence which are of primary importance. First of all, the governance of the withdrawal agreement and questions related to Ireland and Northern Ireland.
Well, that was obviously Barnier through an interpreter. And David Davis was there, and he was telling reporters in Brussels that the implementation timescale post-withdrawal would give businesses the stability they had asked for. And the one victory perhaps here, the UK will be able to strike trade agreements with other countries during that period.
Our teams have worked hard and at pace to secure the terms of a time-limited implementation period that gives the certainty demanded by businesses and citizens across the European Union and United Kingdom.
I presume the logic of the certainty decided by businesses means that actually, this transition deal could last for 30 years. I mean, is this the Brexit we voted for, folks? Let's just look. What are the upsides on today's deal? Well, the upside for Theresa May, I suppose, is that we're now allowed to start talking about trade. Yes, we haven't even got round to that yet. The other upside is we will be able to talk to other countries during that period of time and talk about future trade relationships. But what are the downsides? Well, the downsides are that the Prime Minister has agreed that Northern Ireland will have full regulatory alignment as a backstop. So if they can't reach an agreement on the Irish border and how they're going to monitor it or police it, we will have full regulatory alignment, which means effectively Northern Ireland would stay part of the single market stroke customs union. Something Theresa May told the House of Commons no British Prime Minister could ever accept. But in principle, we've accepted that's there as the backstop. And anybody that arrives at the end of Article 50, right through to the end of 2020, from the European Union, will have the same rights as those who came before Brexit. What it means is that free movement is going to continue. And here's the one that's really got me going. We will not be taking back our territorial fishing waters or the control or management of them. Oh, but we will be allowed to consult. That's nice, isn't it? We'll be able to consult about what goes on inside our own territorial waters. And frankly, I feel we've given away just way, way too much. This is not what we voted for. We did not vote for a transition deal, and we certainly did vote to take back control of our territorial waters. But there is, of course, another possible side to this, which is this. A Prime Minister terrified of big businesses abusing her in public. A Prime Minister really worried about the ultimate numbers in Parliament. And if we concede everything on transition, and even when it comes to a trade deal, we concede a huge amount, I guess if on the 29th of March at midnight next year we do leave the Treaty of Rome, then the great historic break has been made. And that may well be part of the David Davis calculation. In fact, I'm certain that it is part of the David Davis calculation. You know, the history books will record we left the Treaty of Rome, and they think to get there, they have to make all these concessions. Against that, I would say this. a Prime Minister and David Davis, obsessed with numbers in Parliament, have forgotten something. They've forgotten the people in the country. And actually, if she was to have stood firm on issues like fishing, she would take the country with her. And if you take the country with you, you'd be surprised the MPs will follow, because all they really care about is getting re-elected. So, I'm asking you, are you happy with what's been achieved today? And if you think she's done the right thing, she and Davis have done the right thing, we keep the process moving, at least we have a date at which we're going to leave, albeit one much later than we thought during the referendum, then call me on 0345 6060 973. Or if you think it's a complete sellout, particularly over fishing, text me on 84850. And maybe you think, actually, maybe the EU are showing signs now of beginning to give at least some ground on Britain's trade relationship, and that's good news. And you can tweet using the hashtag Farage and LBC at LBC. You can watch us on Facebook and comment there too. Well, Dave's got a point of view. He's already texted in. Betrayed big time. What can you say? Free movement continues, no border controls, and they can fish in our waters. Sold out. I am spitting feathers. That woman has gone against what we voted for, comes in from Honey. Honey, it's difficult to disagree with that, I have to say. I get on Twitter, Nigel, I am not happy that we have given away so much yet again. Why would we allow the EU to oversee any trade discussions we have with third countries during the transition period, says Dave. Well, quite to what extent they will oversee these trade negotiations, I don't know. But if that's the only concession they've made, that we can at least talk trade with other countries, it isn't really a very big one. Nigel, Brexit's been sold out. May should be sacked immediately. This is not what we voted for. And that is the point I've made at the top of this show, and I'm going to go on making. The big question, Nigel, is what are you going to do about it, says Gary from Norfolk. And Jason from Sutton is on the line. Jason, who is a regular on this show and a supporter of the Remain side. Good evening.
Good evening, Nigel. I'll tell you what, man, you Brexiteers, you're such a bunch of snowflakes. You won the election referendum. We're leaving the EU. Why can't you just get over it already?
Because, Jason, it's like buying a car. It's like buying a car and paying the money and not getting the car. That's why.
Well, no, we're leaving the EU. That was the only question that was on the ballot paper.
Yep.
Should we stay or should we leave the EU? That's it. Nobody said it was going to be complicated. All the Brexiteers wanted was to leave the EU, and that's what's happening. If you tell any Brexiteer that they didn't know what leaving the EU actually meant, they get furious. They get frothy at the mouth, saying, no, I know exactly, we're leaving the EU, we're leaving a single market, we're leaving the customs union, yada, yada, yada. And yet nobody realised, on the leave side, nobody talked about trade deals. The fact that we can now sign new trade deals, there isn't a country in the world that we don't already trade with that we can sign a new trade deal with. That simply isn't true, obviously. But Jason, when we voted Brexit, I mean, we were voting for independence, weren't we? We were voting to leave. No. We were. To stay in the EU or to leave the EU. That's the only question.
And leaving the EU was for us to become an independent state. That was the whole point of leaving the Treaty of Rome. And I would put it to you, Jason, that every independent country in the world has its own territorial waters. And yet, we are on course, I hope, to leave the European Union on March 29th next year, and we will not be in control of our territorial waters.
Well, that wasn't on the ballot paper. Nobody said anything about that.
But if you vote to become an independent country as a part...
No, that wasn't the question. That was not
Yes, of course it was. Of course it was. If you leave the European Union, you become an independent country.
Well, clearly not, because you didn't know what leaving the EU actually meant, and nor did Theresa May, nor did David Davis, nor did Michel Barnier.
Jason, for 25 years, I was part of, chairman of, campaign manager of, and leader of a party called the UK Independence Party. I think I know what I was campaigning for.
Well, you were also on the Fisheries Commission of the European Union, and you were one of the worst representatives for Britain.
Because it had no power, Jason. Because it couldn't, even if it was unanimous in what it voted, it couldn't change anything. Jason, I would say this to you, Jason. I think, and we can argue the ins and outs of much of what people on either side thought they were or were not voting for, but I would argue very strongly with you that if we don't get back control of our fisheries when we've left the European Union, that actually is a betrayal of Brexit.
Well, then we will have to agree to disagree, because getting back control of our fisheries means that we're losing 70% of the market that actually buys our fish.
Oh, they'll go on buying the fish.
Union.
Oh, they'll go on buying the fish, Jason. Don't worry about that. You know, Spain will go on buying crabs and lobsters and hake and, frankly, as much as we can sell them. Anyway, Jason, you disagree with me, and that's fine. Martin is a brand new caller to the Nigel Farage Show, and he's calling from Glasgow. Good evening.
Yes, good evening, Nigel. I'm absolutely fuming at the moment. I'm a real Brexiteer.
Yeah.
And I'm being absolutely sold down the river with this woman who's in the Conservative government. They're an absolute disgrace. In Scotland, which I suppose is unusual, which I'm a bit about to say, I voted Conservative in the last one, but never again. There are a bunch of, well, I won't even start. And I think, how long does it take to negotiate? We voted in 2016.
Yep.
They're at it. They're trying to destroy Brexit, and how any caller can come on this phone and defend that gravy train beats me. And I'll tell you right now, I've been listening to the Scottish news tonight, and the fishermen up here are absolutely...
Well, do you know, of all the parts of the United Kingdom, Martin, it's Scotland that has the most to gain from leaving the European Union with its fishing industry. Scotland could be like Norway across the other side of the North Sea, and it is, I think in terms of Scottish interest, a terrible sellout. And I wonder, Martin, you know, you're a Conservative voter, I wonder whether one or two of those Conservative Scottish MPs might give Mrs May a seriously hard time over this.
Well, I'll tell you, Ruth Davison was on the Scottish news tonight, and they've been telling the fishermen, oh yes, we won't do that, we won't do this.
Yeah.
Now, look, we can see clearly what's happened here. And and I've said many times, that Theresa May is obviously a Remainer. Her heart's not in it. Our government are a disgrace. And I've had enough. And it's time we needed somebody with a backbone to stand up to that EU and just say, right, that's it. Enough.
Enough, says Martin, a new caller from Glasgow. I have to say, I don't disagree with him. And while I'm here, Mr Davis, as one of the hundreds of thousands of anglers in this country, I am banned this year from taking home a single bass I catch for tea under EU regulations. Is that going to change under transition, or will we continue to see tackle shops and charter fishing boats going out of business at their current rate? Or don't you simply care? I don't know. You're listening to The Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC. It's 7:16. Handshakes and smiles in Brussels as David Davis and Michel Barnier agree a deal that's going to get rubber-stamped by the 28 heads of government who'll be in the city on Thursday. It goes on until the end of 2020. It allows us to negotiate and sign trade deals during that period, but it is a big sellout on fishing and the continued free movement of people. I'm asking you whether you're satisfied with this deal. Jason was on earlier saying that basically Leavers didn't really know what they were voting for, and as long as we leave the Treaty of Rome, that's fine. I fought back and said, well, surely any independent country can catch its own fish. Graham says, tell Jason that a lot of Remainers didn't know what sort of EU they were voting for. Since the common market, the EU has changed much for the worse, and it's still changing, yet it will not reform. Well, Graham, you know, one thing, during that referendum and before, when people like me said they want to build a European army, we had Cleggers and the others saying, what a load of nonsense. Now they're open about it. They want, by 2025, an army, a navy, an air force, and a foreign policy without veto. So, you know, the EU is not set in its current structure, and its aims to centralise more deeply. Shirley says on Facebook, transition deal is meaningless given nothing is agreed until everything is agreed. Shirley, we heard that at Christmas, didn't we? A deal was done at Christmas where we conceded 40 billion as our leaving bill. We were told, don't worry about it. Nothing is agreed till everything is agreed. But we're stringing this out, aren't we? You know, the very earliest we will get any degree of control over free movement will be the 1st of January 2021, having voted Brexit in 2016. And you know what? I wouldn't put all your chips on that happening either, not with this lot in charge. Alan says, I don't think Brexit is going to happen at all. Well, Alan, we'll have to see. We're due to leave the Treaty of Rome on March 29th next year. Simon says, I welcome more hard-working EU citizens. Well, Simon, we all welcome hard-working, law-abiding EU citizens, but not in limitless numbers. That was really one of the biggest messages coming out of that referendum. Jay says, I did not vote for a transition period. I voted to leave, not to be kept tied to the EU for years to come. Jay, that is exactly what I voted for as well. Jeff is on the line from Edmonton. Good evening, Jeff.
Well, if it was, Nigel, I'm disgusted. I'm beside myself with this. I have 3 daughters and 2 granddaughters.
Yep.
And from what I've been watching online with what's going on with Hungary, the way they're trying to push migrants onto them, large numbers, and the way, basically the news that 1 in 4 women in Sweden will be raped. Down to statistics.
Jeff, I know there has been a dramatic increase in sexual crime in Sweden. I'm not sure 1 in 4 is right, but anyway, go on.
Well, the fact is that people keep talking about money and business and fish, which is all very well. But if your own wife or daughter cannot walk the streets safely, it is worth nothing. Nothing. And let's not make no bones around it. No one wants to talk. Everyone's scared about the elephant in the room. Let's be real. Let's talk the truth, because I know the BBC won't say it and people don't want to talk about it through fear of racism. I'm not racist. My wife is black. Okay? How much more evidence do you want? I'm telling you now that I want my wife to be able to walk down the road wearing a skirt and not be harassed by Middle Eastern men and Somali men who haven't been trained in etiquette, who do not know the meaning of how to treat a woman. And all this money talk and business talk means nothing. Nothing at all. If we don't give this under wraps.
But Jeff, Jeff, that is not, and I understand, you're making a point about cultural integration and some that come into the country, but do bear in mind that in theory, we have control of non-EU migration, and we've dramatically failed with that too. So this isn't just about Brexit. This actually is about a failure of British governments to get a grip, isn't it?
Yes. It's a replacement programme for the indigenous people all across Europe.
Well, Jeff, are you suggesting...
I know you can't agree with me.
Are you suggesting that this is... OK, Tony Blair, one of his senior advisors said, that we want to rub the noses of the right in diversity. Do you think this is a deliberate, willful project to totally change the population through EU immigration?
Yes, so anyone who wants to read about it, all you have to do is look up the clergy plan.
Well, I've heard about this, Jeff. I don't know whether I believe that, but where I would agree with you is, and there are differing degrees of this and differing concerns about this, but we did vote to take back control of our borders, and during transition we won't be doing so. Thank you. Nigel in Bromley says, is the fishing rights deal permanent, or can we control it after the transition period? Nigel, we were told we control it at the end of Article 50. Now we're told it'll go on for another 21 months. And if this lot are in charge, they are so spineless, they will not take back our territorial waters. Of that, I'm convinced. We need a government with some guts. Alan is calling from Walsall. Good evening, Alan.
Evening, Nigel. Pleasure to talk to you.
Pleasure to talk to you.
I've met you a couple of times in Dudley and whatnot, so yeah, it is.
Well, thank you, Alan. Are you satisfied with what's been done today?
Oh, I am not now. I'm absolutely disgusted with what's come out today. It's absolutely disgusting. And you know what, Nigel? I think it's a plan to reverse Brexit, because come 2020, we're going to have another general election, and who do you think's going to get in?
Well, Corbyn, if he was to get in, could, of course, keep us signed up to a customs union, some form of single market. It's always been one of the things that's worried me about transition.
Exactly.
But Alan, if we leave, I mean, if one of the reasons the government is giving so many concessions is because they want to get us through March the 29th next year, if we do leave the Treaty of Rome, even with a rotten deal, that of itself is still a huge achievement, isn't it?
Well, look at the fishing waters in Scotland. Why hasn't Nicola Sturgeon come out? She's been so big on the EU. Why hasn't she come out and said something against the EU?
I think because she loves the European Union, Alan, and she finds it very difficult to criticise over fisheries. What, Alan? Tell me, what's the one thing today that's really disgusted you? Is it fishing?
Well, it's freedom of movement, because how can a country sustain and build for the better when you've got over 300,000 people coming into your country and settling?
Well, it is a total lack of control. None of us know how many will come during that transition period. Alan from Walsall is disgusted. John is calling from Los Beliches in Spain. Hello, John.
Hi, good evening to you, Michael. Just one thing, I'm slightly I agree with most things, but I slightly disagree with the fishing, because I'd have thought this was an opportunity. You must know we have no fishing fleet, no navy to defend it. I think we discussed this before. This gives us a transition period for them to do deals with Norway, who has free waters anyway, to do deals. So when we're ready to go in just over 2 years' time, the Scottish fishers, the fishers all around the UK, would have been made me a done deal.
No, John.
Got the fishing fleet ready to go. I may be wrong, though.
No, John. I mean, at the moment, and it varies year on year, but let's just say over 3/4 of the fish by value are caught by the EU fleet in British territorial waters, right? There will have to be, for us to be reasonable neighbours, a phasing out period of some kind. We're not even going to have that conversation, it seems, until the end of transition. We all thought, John, and actually with Tory manifesto, I criticised the Tory manifesto to be told, shut up, Nigel, you're wrong, we are taking back control of our waters, to now be told, John, it's delayed for a further 21 months. And one thing I've seen in the European Parliament last week is fishing is a major issue, particularly for many Spanish politicians, the country that you're living in now. And I just don't...
You understand that?
Yeah, John, I just don't think that our politicians are brave enough to say, look, we're happy to phase out foreign boats fishing in our waters, but ultimately we want to get to where Norway is. And that, by the way, would be, as in your first sentence, with a new fleet and with fisheries protection. John, I don't think this political class have got the guts to do the right thing.
Well, it would take time. By the way, it's one thing I always wanted to say to you, which always amazed. I mean, if it'd been the motor industry, I'd have been mad, because we export 15 billion of cars to Europe, but we import 45 billion. It never gets bought up. The point I wanted to make was this, really.
Yes, we export cheap cars and import expensive ones, don't we?
Yeah. But the point I wanted to make to you was this, really. If the UK hadn't been inside Europe, and we were trading the same as we are now, with almost 100 billion euro deficit, and on WTO terms, the UK would be getting lots of. Obviously, the whip hand is held by the importer, which is ourselves. And we said to the EU, now as an independent country, we'd like to come in. They would bend over backwards to get us in. They'd say no payment for 10 years, or whatever the case may be. But
of course,
our politicians don't seem to understand that that would be the case. And the Remainers never tell us. If we did remain, we've already been told we would lose our rebate and other things at all. I mean, I don't understand. And
we'd have to join a European army. John, we're out of time. I thank you for your call. That was John from Spain. You're listening to the Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC. It's 7:31. Handshakes and smiles in Brussels today as a UK transition deal is agreed. It'll last until the end of 2020 and be rubber-stamped by the leaders of the 28 nations when they meet on Thursday night in Brussels. Meanwhile, Boris Johnson has been in Brussels as well today. He met the NATO Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg to discuss the Salisbury poisoning. The Foreign Secretary says he welcomes the strong support from UK allies and that progress has been made on looking at ways to counter threats from Russia.
working together, we discussed this in the EU just now, working to tackle disinformation that comes from Russia, a lot of the fake news that's pumped out. Tackling hybrid warfare, as Jens has just said, one of the key things that NATO now has to consider. And of course, looking at how we go after the money.
Well, that was NATO, but I bet you at the summit on Thursday there'll be speeches saying the European Union stands in solidarity with the United Kingdom. Sir Vince Cable already today has been saying, well, Salisbury proves why we have to be part of the European Union. We need to have strong allies. And I can just see this argument being made on Thursday in Brussels. And also the threat from Russia. What are we going to do? Well, I've no doubt that we'll be hearing from many joining the European army would be the right approach to this. I don't believe that. I think it could drag us into conflicts in the future that otherwise we would avoid. I think we should have an independent foreign policy and stay part of NATO, but have nothing to do with the European army, which will get talked up now by Juncker and others as they see Russia as this great, great threat. And all of this happening as today, independent chemical weapons inspectors arrive at Portendown military base in Wiltshire to verify the poison used in the nerve agent attack on Sergei and Yulia Skripal. It's going to take 2 weeks to get those results, and I just don't know why the government didn't call somebody in a little bit sooner. Back to the transition deal. Back to, as I see it, the complete sellout on fisheries and continued free movement. But the one little glimmer, I suppose, of hope is they are allowing us, the world's fifth largest nation that will have left the European Union at the end of March next year, they're allowing us to go out and negotiate trade deals. Oh, thank you, Mr. Barnier. Very nice of you, Mr. Barnier. 3 bags full, Mr. Barnier. I wonder what Matthew from Heathrow makes of all this. Good evening, Matthew.
Oh, hi, Nigel. Basically, yeah, I'm a Remainer, except that we're going to be leaving, and I think it's really positive. I mean, you've got what you want now, Nigel. We could start lining up the trade deals, and you could actually get Trump to give us a trade deal from April next year, and then that way we'll get a better deal with the rest of the EU. I mean, do you think he's going to be ready to sign up that deal April next year? Just over a year.
Matthew, the one thing you're absolutely right about is the prospect of a big trade deal with America gives us huge leverage with the European Union. And I've thought that right from the very start. And that's why the Remainers, not those like you that accept we're going to leave, but those that want us to stay, have been attacking trade with America. You know, chlorinated chicken and all these kind of scare stories. It's as if the argument, Matthew, is trade with Europe, trade deals with Europe, good, trade deals with the rest of the world, bad. Kind of the argument. I agree with you. This is a positive thing. It's the one good thing that's come out of today. But for goodness sake, Matthew, if we're leaving the European Union, we should be doing this without getting permission from Mr. Barnier.
But, well, we've got to solve the Northern Ireland issue, and, I mean, the only way I think we're going to get a really good deal with Europe is if we can already line up that deal and already, you know...
I follow the logic.
With your contacts.
Well, do you know what, Matthew?
For us.
I follow the logic, and I tell you what, I've said it before, Matthew, I'll say it again. If I can be of any help at all, you know, knowing as I do quite a few people in that American administration, Matthew, I'd love to help, but I don't necessarily see Theresa May knocking on my door because I'm not part of the Tory tribe, and they find it very difficult to think that anybody outside of that tribe is capable of absolutely anything. So, Matthew, I'm willing, but I'm not sure they are.
Well, anyway, I think you've got to just turn up with Trump, and they've got to talk to you.
Well, I was with him. I was photographed with him 3 weeks ago, Matthew. So if they want any evidence that there is some degree of relationship there, there it is. But Matthew, your big point is right. Actually, you know, if we can go full steam ahead with this and show that the world is queuing up to talk to us, and they are. Australia, Canada, America, and who knows, you know, dozens of countries want to come and talk to us. We're a big and important market, and if we can get that absolutely going on steroids, it improves our bargaining negotiation towards the end of now 2020. Thank you, Matthew, for your call. No, not at all, I get on Twitter. Negotiations should be mutually beneficial, but I see nothing in this deal for the UK. Well, Rosetta, as I say, we're allowed to negotiate our own trade deals once we've left the European Union. I mean, whoopee-woo, but I guess it's better than nothing. Carol is calling from Folkestone. Good evening, Carol.
Good evening, Nigel.
So, do you think that this transition deal and the concessions we've made are worth it?
I wonder if Mrs May wants out. Perhaps she's actually got some sort of deal with Corbyn. Because really, I think this is going to be the end of her. I truly do. I mean, look, I talked to quite a few people, and there's a lady whose father has his own fruit and vegetable department, quite a large shop, and he maintains the quality of fruit and vegetable coming over, for example, from Spain and France, since we actually said we're going to leave the EU, is really, really poor. You know, they're making us pay for it. And as regards our fishermen, we owe it to our fishermen. We owe it to our farmers to actually let them have their own livelihoods back again.
Well, Folkestone Harbour is a pale imitation of what it was in decades gone by.
Absolutely.
And that's not because of declining fish stocks, although fish stocks change and, you know, you have good decades for one species and good decades for another. But frankly, I mean, you know, of the cod quota in the Eastern Channel, which is exactly where you are there in Folkestone, the British fleet are allowed to catch 7%. That's right, folks, 7%, and France gets 75%, and the rest is divided up between Belgium and the Netherlands. So, Carol, I don't know. I mean, tell me, are the fishermen in Folkestone, in your view, going to make their voice heard? Because they need to.
I hope so. I really do hope so. I mean, we're right behind them. But I was also going to say to you, you know, we're going to have all of these immigrants coming in. Our infrastructure is at breaking point, for goodness sake, Nigel. Our medical services and our schools, they're really, really struggling.
But Carol, if you make a link between our rapidly rising population and open-door immigration and public services, that makes you an extreme bigot. In fact, you should not be allowed to air that opinion, because that's what I've come up against, Carol, over the last few years.
Well, that's what I am, then.
Okay, yeah, I get it. Thank you very much indeed for your call. But that is true. If you try and make a link between the rising population and a shortage of housing, you literally get howled down. I know, 'cause I've been there. Jason is calling from Hornchurch. Hello, Jason.
Hello, Nigel. Nice to speak to you. Well, I mean, quite simply, and ready for this one, that one of the people I blame for this mess is yourself.
Okay, thank you. And why?
No. Well, first of all, as you said, you know, and as I say, I thank you for your service to your country. I really do. You really went through walls for this country. However, when you said you wanted your life back, you also said you wanted your country back. You walked away before the job was done. And because you're not there, and your mate, Aaron Banks, who promised to set up a party, hasn't done so, UKIP has collapsed. Batten is trying to do everything he can on his own. Now, just let me finish a second. Batten is trying to do it on his own. They've got no money. They spent only a couple of $100,000 in the last election. And now they can do what they like, because the way they look at it, who are you going to vote for? You can either vote for Corbyn or you can vote for us. And you won't vote for Corbyn because you're too frightened of what he'll do. Well, right now, I couldn't give a damn if Corbyn did get it. There's no difference between them. They're both left-wing parties. The only difference is that Corbyn will finish the job off quicker than they will.
I think, Jason, I mean, by the way, I'm still leading a group in the European Parliament. I'm still active in politics, but I'm not leading UKIP anymore, thank goodness. I would say this to you, Jason. The decline of UKIP as a political party has, you're right in this, taken a bit of pressure off the establishment, particularly on arguments like immigration, where UKIP not being effectively there in any strength has allowed them all to drop the issue. So I would accept that. However, you know, at the time I stood down from UKIP, Jason, basically, I thought the party was hopelessly out of control. There wasn't much I could do about it, but I'm still battling and fighting, and UKIP does face, Jason, big financial problems. And I'm going to tell you, Jason, in a moment, just how serious those financial problems are. But for now, you're listening to the Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC, and it's 7:45. Well, before the break, we were talking about UKIP and the perilous state that it's in. I made the point politically I couldn't wait to leave it after the referendum because I felt it was being run by a volunteer NEC who were out of control. But money has been the problem. Gerard Batten, the acting leader, and goodness me, there have been a few since I went, sent out a letter last week saying, look, we need money, otherwise we may not survive. And today there is really a bit of a bombshell. This involves Jane Collins, MEP. She's from the Yorkshire and North Lincolnshire region. And she made a statement back in 2014, and it was after the appalling Rotherham sex scandal had come to light. And she said that 3 of the local MPs effectively had ignored the child sex abuse that was going on. She said they must have known, they did know what was happening. They sued for libel, and the party gave Jane Collins a degree of support. A judge today has ruled that degree of support should be £175,000, which UKIP has to pay within the next 2 weeks. Now, the party can appeal against this, and my guess is, and I'm not involved with the day-to-day running of UKIP, I haven't been since June 2016, but my guess is they will have to appeal. But, the truth is, UKIP is facing a real battle just to survive. And yes, that does take the pressure off the Labour Party and the Tory Party in quite a big way. Adrian is calling from Lewisham. Good evening, Adrian.
Hello there.
So, we have a transition deal. We're allowed to negotiate trade deals, but we've had to give a fair few big concessions on things like fishing. Do you reckon that's a good deal?
What I think is, to tell you the truth, Nigel, is that whether it's a good deal or not, basically you are having to come to terms with 2 concepts that you've never had to deal with before. One is the exercise of power, which you've never had, and the other one is reality, the giving people the truthful messages, which you've never had. And in fact, all the promises you made in the referendum, we won't have to pay anything to leave. Wrong.
Oh, no, we don't. No, Adrian, we don't have to pay anything to leave.
Yes, we do.
No, we don't.
It's gonna happen, Nigel.
No, we don't. Hang on, Adrian. We're not hostages. We haven't got to pay him a penny. The fact our Prime Minister has agreed to is a separate issue.
Of course she's agreed to, because she recognises power, as you don't. When have you seen one of those films, Nigel, where somebody picks a fight with 27 other people and wins? It doesn't happen like that in real life. It just doesn't happen.
Well, thank God. Thank God.
You can talk.
Thank God in 1940, Adrian. Thank God in 1940 we had a leader who said, you know what? The fact the others have all gone down like a lot of dominoes, we're not going to do the same. Adrian, we don't have to.
In 1942, the Americans
do anything.
Which, funny enough, you promised. You said that Trump would give us a trade deal within 3 months, back in January of last year.
Yes.
That's nowhere near even starting. It's not.
Oh, Adrian.
Trump can't make
Adrian, he would. He wanted to do a trade deal with us.
But he didn't.
Because we... Oh, dear. Because we said no.
Why didn't he? He's the most powerful man in the world.
Because we said, I'm sorry, because our Prime Minister had to say, I'm sorry, Mr. Trump, but we're not allowed to, because the headmaster, Barnier, has said we can't do this until much later on. And we're now supposed to be grateful that from April 2019, we can talk to Trump about a trade deal. Adrian, the point about a sovereign nation can do what the hell it wants to do. Whether those things are in its interests or not is, of course, a separate debate. But I absolutely refuse to accept that I told people in that referendum anything that wasn't true.
No, you told people things that were not going to come true. You could... the idea that we can walk away paying nothing means that the UK doesn't stand up to its obligations. As a nation, we simply fail to do things that we have already agreed to do. In other words, we welch on a deal. That is not the country that I'm in.
Well, Adrian, they owe us money.
That you would like to build, but it's not the country that I'm in. I'm in a country that I want to be in a people that meets the commitments that it's made, not that welches on them because it wants to do that.
Well, we won't get a welch on the deal because, of course, there is a 7-year spending round of the European Union. It ends, of course, in the middle of 2020, but they also owe us money. Adrian, I'm not going to row about this. Frankly, we should have just called it quits on the money. The reason we're paying 40 billion is effectively we are not leaving the single market. We're staying in the single market, and effectively what the 40 billion really is 40 4 more years membership fees for us to be part of the club. That's really what she's done, isn't it?
The truth is coming home to roost, Nigel. It's about power.
And isn't it funny that the British government appears to be reluctant to take that power back over areas like fishing?
Isn't it funny that they realise you can't fight 27 people and win if you're one person? That's the reality you're having to deal with, Nigel, and it's just not happening for you, is it, mate? It's just not happening.
Not with this Prime Minister, Adrian. I would agree. We need somebody a little bit stronger. Barry from Tamworth says, I suppose Bob Geldof, on hearing the news that we are not going to protect British fishermen, will release another record entitled I Like Mondays. Bob Geldof, of course, on the Thames in 2016, telling British fishermen what a great deal they had under the Common Fisheries Policy, and a few of them squirted in with water. I'm surprised even worse didn't happen that day on the Thames. I'm pleased overall that it didn't, I must say. Charlotte is calling from the Forest of Dean. Good deal or bad deal, Charlotte?
A very bad deal, Nigel. I'm absolutely incandescent here. I think we've yet again been sold down the river, and this is Brexit in name only. They've given away every single thing that we voted for, and they've just capitulated and rolled over, and I think it's a disgrace to us, and it's an insult to the 17.4 million people who voted Brexit.
Charlotte, that view is really, really very, very clearly expressed. Do you think your friends and family who voted Brexit, I mean, will they feel this as strongly as you do?
Well, to be honest with you, I persuaded my sister to vote Brexit, and she's made me pay for that every single day since. And I think my mother and stepfather voted Remain.
Yeah.
Because I think, they're not very politically motivated, and they believe everything that the BBC tells them. But, I voted Brexit, and I feel that there's 17.4 million of us who today are just staring into an abyss. We've got no political party who is there and standing for us. Mog's not said anything. Davis has gone native. It's a complete and utter shambles. And the thing is that I live in the Forest of Dean, and you've had a lot of people talking about immigration and everything else. There won't be any Forest of Dean if they build any more damn houses here.
Well, we've got to build lots more houses, Charlotte, in the Forest of Dean and elsewhere, because we're going to have a population that continues to rise by about 500,000 people every single year, 3/4 of which is directly down to the immigration policies pursued over the last 25 years. And none of that with the EU will change during the transition period. Charlotte, thank you. Charlotte, they're incandescent. Dawn says, if Jacob Rees-Mogg was PM, we'd be out by now. Well, only if Jacob Rees-Mogg could get a majority in Parliament to support that. And that is the one limiting factor. It's the one thing I'll say in favour of David Davis today. Maybe he has to give all these concessions to get us out of that Treaty of Rome at the end of March next year. Maybe. I still think it's the wrong approach. I still think stand up strong, take the country with you, and Parliament would follow. Raj says, where does this 40 billion come from? Seriously, Raj, it comes from you, matey. It comes from the taxpayer. That is how it works. Anthony is calling from Strawberry Hill. Good evening, Anthony.
Good evening to you, Nigel. I've got a little situation tomorrow. I've got 50,000 fish, and I'm just wondering if anybody knows where Teresa is tomorrow. I'd like to deliver it to her.
You've got 50,000 fish, Anthony, have you?
Yeah, I'm thinking I'll do away with it, and as a tax loss, and as a bit out of date, I thought I'd deliver them to Teresa somewhere. Does anybody know where she is?
Anthony, we are not French smallholders or protesters, and we do not support the dumping of manure.
I was going to deliver. I'm going to lose any case. We can't, I spent millions of pounds investing into the fish industry, and next thing I know, I've got to wait another 2, 3, 4 years more before I can get my return back.
Is it a sellout of the fishing industry, Anthony?
Well, sellout is it? Well, that's a polite way of saying it. Yeah. There is, but I can't enter the other words I'd like to say. But,
No, and we're before the watershed. Anthony, I thank you. Well, I have to say that during this transition period, what will happen in both the commercial fishing industry and in the angling industry, still the biggest participant sport in this country, is many more people will go bust and go out of business because our government hasn't got the guts to stand up and represent what Brexit voters wanted. Independence means taking back your waters. You've been listening to the Nigel Farage Show here on LBC. I'm back tomorrow at 7. At 10 tonight, it's Ian Collins. But up next, it's Clive Bull.
Nigel, thank you.